Hey guys, tonight we are drifting far above the clouds into a place where gods and goddesses wear golden robes, sip nectar, and stare moodily into the distance for centuries. You're not here to battle monsters or win favor from Zeus. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive that. Anyway, no, tonight. We're here to visit the loneliest hearts of Olympus, the women. The overlooked, the immortal, the eternally misunderstood. Get ready to hear 4 sad stories, woven not from battle cries or epic quests, but from sighs, side eyes, and divine ghosting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Are you in bed already? Or sneaking this under the covers? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing near the throne of Hera, Queen of Olympus, who always looks like she's about to ask to see the manager. Her hair's perfect, her robes wrinkle-free, and her eyes are scanning the heavens for one specific thing: betrayal. Which, let's be honest, isn't hard to find when you're married to Zeus. She wasn't always like this. Hera started out with hope. Once a youthful, radiant goddess of family and marriage, she was charmed by the king of the gods. That is, until she realized the job description included an unlimited supply of heartbreak. You can't file for divorce when your husband controls lightning. Zeus, for reasons no scholar can explain without sighing heavily, spent most of his time turning into swans, golden rainbows, you name it all, just to chase mortal women. And every time he succeeded, it was Hera who came storming in afterward, not to punish Zeus, but the poor women left behind. Historians still argue whether this was a display of rage, displaced pain, or divine pettiness. But let's not get in the middle of that debate tonight. You tiptoe past a statue of Io, a priestess Zeus, transformed into a cow. Hera, she sent a gadfly to sting poor Io forever. Then there's Semele, tricked into asking Zeus to reveal his god form, which vaporized her on the spot. Hera didn't even flinch, but the baby survived. Of course it did. It's Greek mythology. Babies are indestructible plot devices. What's strange is how Hera could have been one of the most powerful forces for good. She ruled over weddings and childbirth, loyalty and legacy, but her image, forever cemented by myth after myth, is that of a jealous wife, endlessly punishing her rivals instead of confronting her spouse. It's the kind of reputation you don't shake even if you do hold the scepter of Olympus. Mainstream scholars agree Hera's cult was prominent across ancient Greece, particularly in places like Argos and Samos, where massive temples rose in her honor. But these shrines didn't tell tales of her vengeance. They worshipped her as the mother of civilization, the divine protector of the city-state. A fascinating contradiction. The ancient world feared her wrath, but built her statues anyway. And here's a weird tidbit to keep you awake longer than intended. Some lesser-known versions of her mythology suggest she may have borne a child without Zeus at all, Hephaestus, god of blacksmiths and volcanoes, just popped him out on her own. No man involved. Revenge parenting, if you will. But none of this brought her peace. Not the temples, not the worship, not even her children. Hera stayed on Olympus, eternally regal, eternally alone, trapped in a cycle of fury and disappointment. You can almost hear her sigh through marble lips. She watched generations come and go, saw her name etched in myths and retellings, always as the scorned one, the one who punished but never healed. She lingered in the background wearing resentment like a crown, while Zeus continued to flirt with stars and nymphs. And still she stayed, because even in Olympus where no one dies, loneliness is very much alive. You're still beside Hera, and things aren't getting any cozier. The throne room is too bright, too echoey, too polished, like one of those hotel lobbies where no one actually relaxes. And somewhere in the polished floors and perfect columns, the memory of her wedding flickers stubborn as a wine stain on silk. Yes, even goddesses get cold feet, especially when marrying Zeus. It wasn't a love story, not in the way you hope. There was no candlelit dinner, no soft music. There was, however, a fair amount of trickery. According to the myths, Zeus disguised himself as a helpless cuckoo bird to gain Hera's sympathy. She cradled him in her arms, and boom, he transformed back into himself and declared they were getting married. Consent was very loosely defined in Olympus, let's just say. Historians still argue whether this wedding myth was symbolic of merging cult traditions or simply an excuse to explain Hera's eternal resentment. Either way, there's a consensus no one's throwing rice at this ceremony. The gods gathered, of course. The wedding was held in secret under a sacred tree in the garden of the Hesperides, with nymphs singing and ambrosia flowing like wine at a college reunion. Gaia Earth herself gifted Hera a golden apple tree as a wedding present. Yes, that golden apple tree, the one that later started the whole Trojan War mess. Because Greek weddings never end with just cake. But let's not get distracted. The real tragedy here is that Hera didn't want this marriage. She agreed, perhaps, because she thought she could change Zeus. Or maybe because being queen of Olympus sounded better than being another forgotten daughter of Titans. Whatever her reasons, the consequences were eternal. You watch her now, recalling the vows she was forced to take, each one echoing like thunder, each one wrapping tighter around her like silk ropes, to love, honor, and rule beside. Except he didn't honor, and he definitely didn't rule beside. He ruled through drama, and Hera was stuck playing cleanup. In mortal terms, imagine marrying someone who constantly throws wild parties, without telling you, flirts with every waitress, and then blames you for being dramatic when you get upset. Now imagine you can never leave, because eternity. And the thing is, Hera wasn't just Zeus's wife. She was his equal in power and presence. Ancient sources even hint that in the early days, her worship may have rivaled or even predated his. But mythology isn't always kind to powerful women. The stories trimmed her down into a caricature, the bitter wife, the vengeful queen, a cautionary tale. Fun fact, some ancient Greeks believed that every year Hera renewed her virginity by bathing in a sacred spring near Argos. Whether symbolic or not, it paints a strange poetic picture, a goddess trying to wash away centuries of unwanted marriage over and over, like scrubbing at a stain that just won't lift. You walk with her along the veranda of Olympus now, where the wind is soft and the stars blink like tired eyelids. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her silence is the kind that says, "I've seen more than you could bear," and she has. You imagine the wedding photos, Zeus grinning like he's already got a plan B, Hera smiling through clenched teeth, Hermes probably photobombing in the back, and somewhere in the corner, Aphrodite raising an eyebrow, like she knows exactly how this is going to end. Because it always ends in the same place, Hera alone misunderstood, rewriting her face into a mask of dignity. The only thing she can control anymore is her posture. There's something quietly devastating about a goddess of marriage being trapped in the worst one imaginable. About someone who presides over vows, family, and fidelity, watching her own unravel daily. She stayed, not because she had no choice. She stayed because she was the choice, the symbol, the example. Even now, as the myths fade and the temples crumble, she's still holding the pose, still sitting upright, still waiting for someone to ask what she really wanted. Spoiler, no one ever did. You've drifted from Olympus now, not because anyone asked you to leave, but because Hera's quiet rage was starting to hum like an old fridge. Instead, you find yourself in a golden field that's slowly turning gray, the wheat bowing under a sky that doesn't quite know what season it is. Somewhere in the distance, a cold wind stirs. It carries the scent of dying leaves, cracked earth, and something softer grief. This is where Demeter waits. You wouldn't know it just looking at her. She's tall, glowing, wrapped in harvest colors, but there's a storm behind her eyes. It's the look of a mother who's lost something she can't replace. And in her case, it's not a metaphor. She literally lost her daughter to the underworld. Persephone, the light of her life, was out picking flowers one afternoon when the ground cracked open and Hades burst forth in a flaming chariot. Because apparently that's how you propose when you're a god of the dead. No phone call, no brunch with the parents, just a good old-fashioned kidnapping. And here's where it gets weird. Zeus, who was both Persephone's father and the king of the gods, knew about it. He said nothing. Some versions even say he approved it. Historians still argue whether this was divine matchmaking, political symbolism, or just another Greek example of consent is optional if you're immortal. You stand beside Demeter as she wanders the earth, barefoot and furious, looking for her child. Mountains wither, rivers dry up, the cows stop mooing, crops die in their roots. Mortals, quite understandably, begin to panic. This is the world's first winter, not because the planet tilted or the sun got lazy, but because Demeter stopped caring. There's something haunting in the way she does it, not with rage, but with silence. She doesn't scream. She simply withdraws. She lets the world feel what it's like to live without joy, without nourishment, without love. You'd think the other gods would have fixed it immediately. But no, they let Earth turn to dust for months, because Olympus, like a group text full of passive-aggressive ants, is not quick to intervene unless it's dramatic enough. Eventually, someone nudges Zeus and says, hey, maybe we should check in on that whole everyone's starving to death situation. And that's when Demeter gets her audience. She arrives not as a weeping mother, but as a force of nature. Mainstream mythologists note that Demeter's cult was especially strong in Eleusis, where the Eleusinian mysteries, an initiation rite so secretive we still don't know what happened, there promised knowledge of life, death, and rebirth. It makes sense. Demeter's pain isn't just myth, it's a ritual. And now for the quirky part, in some lesser-known versions, Demeter disguises herself as an old woman named Doso and takes a job nannying a mortal baby. She even tries to make him immortal by roasting him in a fire, which, as you might expect, did not go over well with the parents. But she meant well. Eventually, a deal is struck. Persephone is allowed to return, but only for part of the year. See, while in the underworld, she ate 6 pomegranate seeds, a symbolic no-no, because eating the food of the dead means you belong there now. Whether she was tricked, coerced, or simply hungry is still a topic of debate among scholars and story lovers alike. So, the compromise, 6 months with her mother, 6 months with Hades, spring and summer for joy, autumn and winter for grief. A custody arrangement carved into the seasons, and Demeter, she accepts it. Not because it's fair, but because it's the closest she'll ever get to having her daughter back. You sit beside her now as she kneels in the soil, coaxing the first green shoots from the earth. She doesn't smile exactly, but there's something like peace on her face, a moment of stillness between storms. But you can tell when Persephone leaves again, she'll break all over, and the world will break with her. You're still crouched in the dirt beside Demeter, watching as she gently presses her fingers into the soil. Around you, the air begins to shift. Soft buds open on the trees. Grass unfurls like it's exhaling. It's the first breath of spring, but even now there's a weight hanging over everything, a kind of sorrow folded into the roots. Because you know what's coming. Persephone will have to leave again, and nothing can stop it. Let's rewind for a second. You were told this was a story about love and balance, about how the earth must sleep as much as it grows. But when you scratch away the poetic metaphors, what you really find is a mother who had to bargain with her grief, and a daughter who never truly had a choice. Persephone was taken. Hades emerged from the underworld grabbed her, and vanished. That's not flirtation, it's abduction. Yet somehow over the centuries, the story's been rewritten into a sort of gothic romance. You know the type: brooding man, innocent girl, eternal longing. Historians still argue whether Persephone loved Hades in the end, or whether she simply adapted, as so many women in myths have had to do. After all, what's more Greek than making tragedy look like destiny? You walk with Persephone now, her sandals brushing the edge of a field. She's half in light, half in shadow. She's both maiden and queen daughter and ruler. And every step she takes feels like she's walking in two worlds that will never quite touch. The underworld isn't what you expect. There's no fire, no torture. It's quiet, vast, endless, more like a subway station at midnight than a torture chamber. Souls drift past, silent and barely visible. Hades sits on his obsidian throne, watching Persephone like she's the only candle in a kingdom of fog. And here's something odd. In many myths, he never cheats on her, not once. While Zeus is busy turning into animals and Poseidon is out seducing sea monsters, Hades is faithful. Scholars still debate if this makes him romantic possessive or just deeply boring, maybe all three. Still, Persephone's time there isn't easy. She has responsibilities now. She decides the fate of souls. She presides over the dead. And in some versions, she even likes it. She finds a strange kind of power in the quiet, a sense of control she never had on Olympus. But that doesn't mean she stops missing her mother. You can almost feel it in the way the underworld shifts when her 6 months are up. The darkness lifts just slightly. The ground stirs, and somewhere on the surface, Demeter lifts her head. This is the cycle, every year, forever. 6 months of warmth when Persephone returns. 6 months of frost when she descends. Mortals chalk it up to seasons. But the truth is much heavier. It's the echo of a deal no one really wanted stitched into time, like a scar that never fades. There's something quietly brutal about it. The compromise, the rules, the fruit. All of it hangs like frost on your eyelashes. And here's a quirky little myth to make it even weirder. In some versions, Persephone actually tricks Hades in return. She asks him for a favor, let a friend's soul go, and when he says no, she calmly threatens to destroy the entire underworld with her rage. He gives in, which means she might be the only being Hades ever feared. Not bad for someone who started out picking flowers. You watch her now, climbing up from the darkness into spring. Her face is serene, but her eyes flicker torn between two homes, two selves, two eternities. She waves to the dead as she leaves, and they part like shadows around a flame. Demeter is already running. No chariot, no divine fanfare, just a mother sprinting toward the thing she loves most. They meet in a field of soft green wheat. They don't speak. They don't need to. You want to stay in that moment where everything blooms, but deep down you know they're only renting happiness. Winter is always coming back, and so is the goodbye. You're high above Olympus again, this time peering into a room that echoes like an empty library. The walls are carved with wisdom, etched with owls, and glimmer, faintly, with the blue-silver sheen of moonlight on stone. In the center stands a woman, tall armored completely still. Her name is Athena, and she was born with a migraine. That's not a joke. Zeus had a headache so fierce he begged Hephaestus to crack his skull open with an axe. Logical right. And from that cosmic cranial split out sprang Athena, fully grown, in armor sword in hand. Historians still argue whether this symbolizes strategic thought emerging from divine chaos, or just another example of Greek myths being written during long wine-fueled nights. You blink and look again. Athena doesn't even blink back. She's sculpted from thought, sharper than any blade she carries. And unlike Hera or Demeter, her loneliness isn't woven in grief or betrayal. Hers is made of distance. Because Athena is never quite human. She didn't have a childhood. She didn't cry or laugh or scrape her knees. She entered the world as a concept, not a baby. Born not of love, but of pressure literally, and expectation. You walk with her now, through her temple, the Parthenon. It's one of the few ancient monuments that still stands tall today, if a bit wind-worn. Tourists snap selfies unaware that somewhere Athena is watching. Maybe not with eyes, but with presence. After all, she's the goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and practical crafts. You know, the stuff that actually keeps society running. But here's the thing. Athena's a virgin goddess. Not because she's prudish or shy. She just doesn't do romance. And not in an I'm waiting for the right person kind of way. Inner romance is deeply inefficient and honestly kind of gross kind of way. This doesn't mean she lacks emotion. Far from it. But her love is the silent, vast kind, the sort of loyalty that doesn't need poems. She adopts heroes. She mentors mortals. She watches cities rise and fall, and she builds knowledge in the ashes. Her affections are careful measured, like a perfectly balanced equation. Still, even wisdom has its shadows. You remember how she cursed Medusa, right? Most people forget the full story. Medusa wasn't always a monster. She was a beautiful priestess in Athena's temple. But then Poseidon, yes, that Poseidon forced himself on her. In Athena's temple. And Athena, she didn't punish Poseidon. She punished Medusa. Scholars still debate whether Athena's response was cold justice, a symbolic shielding, or divine deflection. Maybe she gave Medusa her deadly gaze as protection. Or maybe she just couldn't bear the stain on her perfect logic. You'll never know. Because Athena doesn't explain herself. She simply turns silent and gleaming and moves on. Here's a fun, strange tidbit. The ancient Greeks believed that owls could see in the dark because they carried fragments of Athena's wisdom in their eyes. So, If you ever see an owl staring you down like it knows your browser history, blame her. You wander through her myths now, like a student late to class. She's always there, offering clever advice to heroes like Odysseus and Perseus, popping up like the world's most intense life coach. She gives tools, knowledge blueprints, but never a hug. It's not that Athena doesn't care. It's that she can't risk softness. Her power is in her detachment. You watch her pause in the shadows of her temple. The wind shifts. Her armor doesn't move, but something in her does. She looks out across the marble steps where once there were crowds, candles, sacrifices. Now there's just silence. And you begin to wonder what happens to a goddess of wisdom when there's no one left to ask her anything. She stands there, alone, surrounded by echoes, and not a single one answers back. You stay a few paces behind Athena, now careful not to disturb her perfectly measured stride. Her sandals don't even scuff the marble. Every movement is calculated like a chess master who already knows how the game ends. And as you walk with her into a grove of silver-leafed olive trees, the gift she once offered Athens, you begin to notice something odd. There's no one else around. For a goddess so widely worshipped, so deeply respected, Athena is remarkably solitary. She doesn't flirt, doesn't wed, doesn't even seem interested. Her title isn't just goddess of wisdom, but Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin. Not virgin as in naive, but virgin as in utterly autonomous, untouchable, uninterested, and not for lack of offers. Gods tried. Mortals dreamed. But Athena, she built walls, not bridges. Love is messy. Strategic thinking isn't. Still, even a goddess who outsmarts everyone can't dodge every awkward myth. There was once a craftsman, Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, who got a little too hopeful. According to one tale, he tried to force himself on her, and when she fought him off, some residue fell on the earth. From that, a child was born, not to her, but to Gaia, the earth itself. His name was Erichthonius, and Athena raised him like a mother. Anyway, historians still argue over the meaning of that story. Was it about boundaries, power, a warning to respect autonomy, or just one of those uncomfortable myths the Greeks told around the fire after too much wine? Regardless, Athena never strayed from her vow, and because of that, she stood apart. At every feast, every war council, every divine drama she observed, she advised. But she never joined in the emotional wreckage that came with Olympian entanglements. And here's the thing that distance made her powerful. Mortals trusted her because she didn't have messy love affairs or personal vendettas. Okay, except maybe Medusa. She represented reason, structure, the kind of cool clarity you reach at 2 a.m. after deleting a text you know you shouldn't send. But loneliness can be quiet armor. You don't realize it's heavy until you try to take it off. You notice how the statues of her never smile. how her eyes always look past you, as if scanning the horizon for threats no one else sees. You realize she's always working, always thinking, always prepared, and always alone. Even her companions are chosen for their silence. The owl, the shield, the spear, tools not friends. And when mortals dared to get too close, the results were usually tragic. Take the story of Tiresias, just a boy walking through the forest when he accidentally glimpsed Athena bathing. For that, she blinded him. Some versions say she gave him the gift of prophecy to make up for it. Others say it was just a harsh reminder that even the idea of intimacy was too much. Or take her relationship with Odysseus. She guided him home, saved his life multiple times, admired his cunning, but love never on the table. She was his strategist, not his siren, his brain, not his heart. Here's a curious tidbit. The olive tree, her sacred symbol, isn't just a peace offering. It's also slow to grow, requires care, and lives a long, quiet life. Just like her, steady, watchful, patient. You walk with her beneath those olive trees now, their silvery undersides catching the moonlight. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. You're not a threat. You're just another ghost wandering through the quiet edges of her story. There's no heartbreak in Athena's tale, no betrayal, no tragedy in the classic sense, just absence. A whole life made of thoughtful space where connection might have been. She lifts her chin eyes, scanning Olympus one more time, as if cataloging every flaw in the marble. And then she turns her cloak, whispering behind her, disappearing into a corridor of books, blueprints, and stone. No one calls after her. No one ever does. You're not in Olympus anymore. You're somewhere darker, smaller, quieter, beneath vaulted ceilings and dim torchlight, inside a room that smells faintly of wool and old stories. You hear the soft, rhythmic pull of thread against a loom, over and under, over and under. The kind of sound that keeps you company when no one else does. Welcome to the home of Arachne. She's not a goddess. Not yet, anyway. Just a mortal girl from Lydia who had one extraordinary talent weaving. Her tapestries were so beautiful, so detailed, so alive that people whispered she must have been taught by Athena herself. Not that Arachne appreciated the compliment. She didn't believe in giving credit to invisible mentors. No, she said. She was self-taught and better than Athena, which in Greek mythology is a bit like saying you could beat a bear in arm wrestling and then knocking on its cave to prove it. The story varies depending on the source. Some versions say Athena disguised herself as an old woman to warn Arachne. Others say she appeared immediately, radiating divine authority and disappointment. Either way, a contest was arranged. 2 looms, 2 women, 1 mortal, 1 goddess. You sit cross-legged in the corner, the air thick with tension and dust. The only sound is the low scratch of thread, pulled taut. Arachne's fingers move like spells, conjuring images that shimmer across her cloth scenes of the gods behaving terribly, Zeus seducing women in bizarre disguises, Poseidon committing crimes, Dionysus partying his way through consent, Athena's tapestry, scenes of noble victories, structured order, obedient mortals. It's neat, precise, safe. And then she sees Arachne's. It's flawless. Every thread sings, every figure breathes, and every scene exposes the divine as deeply, profoundly human, jealous, lustful, unfair. Historians still argue whether Athena was furious because of the skill or because of the truth. Maybe both. You watch her rise lips tight and tear Arachne's tapestry apart. Then she does something worse. She turns the girl into a spider. Or more gently, she lets her become one. A creature doomed to weave forever, hanging upside down in dark corners, her gifts reduced to a reflex. And here's the fringe version of this tale. Some say Athena felt guilty, that the transformation wasn't a punishment, but a preservation. A way to let Arachne live through her art even if it meant loneliness for eternity. Because spiders, for all their silence, are patient artists. Their webs shimmer in dew. Their patterns are sacred geometry. And like Arachne, they're rarely appreciated until you accidentally walk through one and scream into the void. You follow her now, the first of her kind drifting through rafters and shadows. No voice, no body, just thread and instinct. She's not angry anymore, just distant, as if her spirit unwound along with her last mortal tapestry. And here's a strange little fact to stitch into your brain. The Greeks believed that spider webs were woven from memory, that each strand was a forgotten dream trying to retell itself. So maybe Arachne isn't gone. Maybe she's still telling her true thread by delicate thread in the corners of temples and bedrooms where no one dares look too closely. You return to Athena, just briefly. She's staring at her loom untouched since the contest. The threads are still taut, but she hasn't woven anything since. It's as if she saw perfection once and decided never to try again. In a different story, they might have worked together, mortal and goddess, weaving history and justice side by side. But in Olympus, pride always wins. And so one sits in silence among the stars, and the other hangs alone in the rafters, both still weaving, both still watching. You tiptoe out from the shadows of the loom, brushing stray webs from your shoulders, only to find yourself in a forest so silent it hums. The air is heavy with pine and the promise of danger. Moonlight filters through thick leaves. You hear nothing until a bowstring sings softly and a stag bolts into the distance, hooves like thunder against moss. You're in Artemis's domain now. She doesn't need temples or thrones. Her kingdom is the wilderness raw and untamed. She moves like wind across a lake, fast unseen and undeniably cold. A pack of hounds follows her lean and tireless, while moonlight clings to her skin like armor. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, of the moon of wild things. She's also another proud virgin goddess, like Athena, but with a different kind of solitude. Where Athena's detachment is intellectual, Artemis's is primal. She's not watching from above. She's moving through the underbrush, knife in hand, and she doesn't do men, not romantically, not conversationally, not at all. In fact, most of the men who stumble into her stories don't exactly make it to the end. You remember poor Orion, right? A great hunter, tall, handsome, maybe too confident for his own good. Some versions say they were friends. Others whisper that he dared to pursue her romantically. Either way, the ending's never good. Sometimes she kills him herself. Sometimes it's a scorpion she sends after him. Sometimes it's her brother Apollo who tricks her into shooting him from afar. Historians still argue over the true nature of Artemis and Orion's relationship. Was it love, platonic respect, a cautionary tale about what happens when a man forgets where he stands? Either way, Orion ends up a constellation, forever distant, forever unreachable, a spark of what could have been hanging above the woman who will never look back. Then there's Actaeon. Poor guy was just out with his hunting dogs when he accidentally stumbled upon Artemis bathing. An honest mistake, except not one you get to survive. She turned him into a stag, and his own dogs, not recognizing their master, tore him apart. It's the kind of story you read twice, hoping it ends differently the second time. It doesn't. Here's the quirky bit. The myth says Artemis didn't even raise her voice. She simply splashed him with water. That's it. One flick of divine bathwater, and his entire existence unraveled. She's not cruel, exactly, just absolute. She has a clear sense of right and wrong, of respect and boundaries. And if you cross them, even by accident, she doesn't flinch. She delivers judgment like an avalanche, silent, sudden, and final. You follow her through the forest now. She doesn't walk, she glides. Her hounds don't bark, they just are blending with the dark. She doesn't need a torch, the moon follows her. And despite all this power, all this control, you start to notice the loneliness stitched into her edges. She doesn't stay in one place, doesn't sit by the fire with friends, doesn't share stories or laughter or doubt. She keeps moving, always moving. Like the moon, she governs present, yet distant. The mortals who worshipped her didn't come to her for advice or favor. They came for protection, for vengeance, for justice beyond civilization. She was the one they whispered to in the dark when laws failed and forests hid secrets. And her reply was always the same swift, cold, final. Even among the gods, she's elusive. No consort, no children, no scandals. Just Artemis, the eternal outsider, her heart guarded by pine needles and wolf howls. Fun fact, in some places, her worship merged with local forest spirits, and people believed she could appear as a deer herself, watching from the brush, waiting to see if you were hunter or prey. You lie down in a bed of soft moss, watching her silhouette vanish into the trees. Her bow glints once in the moonlight, then disappears. She doesn't say goodbye. She never does. You're still in the forest, barely breathing, hoping not to disturb the silence Artemis left behind. The trees are thicker here. The moonlight doesn't touch the ground. Everything feels like it's holding its breath. And then you hear its splashes of water, gentle, repetitive, the sound of someone bathing, which would be relaxing if you weren't standing in the middle of a cursed myth. You inch closer and peek through the leaves. There she is, Artemis again, knee-deep in a clear pool, her back-turned silver hair coiled like the moon itself. There's nothing flirtatious about her, nothing soft. She bathes like a ritual, methodical and unhurried. And you know what's about to happen. You wish you could change it. You really do. Actaeon stumbles in. He's just a hunter. Maybe he's following a deer. Maybe he's lost. Maybe the gods moved the trees just enough to draw him here. Either way, his foot snaps a twig. She turns, and it's over. No screaming, no explanation. She lifts a handful of water and flicks it at him. That's all. The transformation begins instantly. His arms become legs. His hands sprout hooves, and his neck lengthens until he's no longer a man, but a stag. Panicked, he turns to run. And from the trees, his own dogs, the ones he raised from pups, leap out. They don't recognize him. They just see prey. It's over in moments. And Artemis, she's already gone. You sit in the aftermath. The pool ripples gently. There's no blood here, only absence. A clean silence that somehow feels worse. Historians still argue whether Actaeon was punished for seeing what he shouldn't have or for daring to look at all. Was it about violation? About divine privacy? Or was it once again the gods teaching mortals not to mistake curiosity for permission? There's another version, you know. One where he boasted he was a better hunter than Artemis. And this brutal end was the price of arrogance. But no matter the version, the result is the same. A man torn apart by his own hounds while a goddess dries her hair and walks away. And here's the strange, twisted detail. After Actaeon's death, his dogs didn't understand what they'd done. They howled for him, searched for him, refused to eat, until a statue was made to look like their master. Only then did they stop mourning. That's the kind of grief Artemis leaves in her wake. You wonder just briefly what she felt, if anything. Not regret exactly, but maybe a flicker of recognition that even the cleanest judgments leave a stain somewhere. That silence doesn't always mean indifference. You move now through the underbrush, careful not to rustle the leaves. You pass stones carved with old names, half sunk into the moss. Shrines, offerings, pleas. No one calls out to her, no one dares, because Artemis doesn't forgive. She doesn't explain. She simply upholds the line between sacred and profane, and makes sure no one crosses it twice. She's the moon in its sharpest phase, beautiful distant and not quite safe to touch, and in her forest privacy is absolute. You've wandered deeper into Artemis's forest now, where the trees grow so closely together they whisper your secrets to one another. The air is cooler here, full of pine sap and damp soil. It feels like the kind of place people enter and forget who they were. You reach a small clearing, ringed with pale stones, as if someone long ago tried to build a home but gave up halfway through. In the center is a low fire, barely smoldering, and just beyond it, someone sits alone, stroking the feathers of a falcon perched silently on her arm. It's Artemis again, but not the huntress version. This is the Artemis who loved quietly, cautiously, and learned the cost. You see, while Artemis was never interested in romantic love, she wasn't immune to friendship. Deep, fierce friendship. The kind that's rare even among mortals, let alone gods. And it's in these connections that her solitude gets complicated. Take Callisto, a devoted follower of Artemis, one of her hand-picked hunting companions. They ran through forests together, raced deer, shared stories by starlight. But Callisto had a secret. She was pregnant, not by choice. Zeus, again, of course, because he never read the word boundaries. When Artemis found out, her reaction wasn't warmth, it was fury, betrayal. Whether she believed Callisto had broken her vow or simply couldn't process the violation, she cast her out. Some myths say Artemis shot her. Others say she turned her into a bear. Both are bad. Neither feel like justice. And then years later, Callisto's son Arcas almost kills her while hunting. Zeus, for once doing something moderately helpful, flings them both into the sky to save them. That's how the constellations Ursa Major and Ursa Minor were born. Mother and son, frozen in the stars, always close, never touching. Historians still argue whether Artemis regretted what she did, whether she acted from pain, from shame, or from that rigid, immovable code she built around herself. Whatever the reason, Callisto was lost, not just from Artemis's circle, but from her heart. You look around the fire now. The clearing is silent but heavy, like memory has weight, and you realize Artemis has had more of these losses than you thought. There was also Hippolytus, the prince who loved her above all others, who shunned Aphrodite and worshipped Artemis instead. A fatal mistake. Aphrodite, not one to be snubbed, arranged his death. A chariot crash, horses gone wild, and Artemis, too late to save him, could only stand at the end, arms crossed, jaw clenched, already planning her revenge. She promised him honor, a cult, a legacy. But it's not the same, is it? A shrine can't replace a voice. You sit beside her now, not saying anything. She doesn't look at you, but you feel her, see you all the same. She's not angry, not weeping, just still. Here's a strange little detail for your dreams. In some regions of ancient Greece, there were festivals where young girls would pretend to be bears to honor Artemis and remember Callisto. They wore yellow robes and danced like cubs, a ritual of innocence and its loss. And you wonder, what must it feel like to be honored by stories of the people you couldn't protect? You reach toward the fire. The embers shift. One of her hounds rests its head on your knee for just a moment, then pulls away. Even comfort here is borrowed, because Artemis doesn't open her heart easily, and when she does, the world tends to punish it. So she stays in the woods, with her hounds, with the moon, with memories stitched into constellations that no longer blink. A goddess of wild freedom, still trapped in a loop of loss. You step out of Artemis's forest and into a softer warmth, like stepping into a kitchen just after bread has been pulled from the oven. The air smells of ash and olive oil, lavender, and something sweet you can't quite name. There are no sharp edges here, no arrows, no divine punishments, just a hearth. And beside it, Hestia. She doesn't notice you at first, or maybe she does and simply doesn't mind. She's stirring something in a clay pot, not for any ceremony, not to impress you, just because the flame needs tending. Hestia is the goddess of the hearth of home, of comfort. And unlike the others, she's not known for battles, seductions, or dramatic revenge plots. She's not in most stories, which is exactly the point. Her power isn't in the spotlight. It's in the silence between the loud things. You look around, there's no throne, no glittering robes, no entourage, just a fire. A simple, steady fire that never goes out. Hestia was the firstborn of the Olympians, and also, strangely, the last. You see, when Kronos devoured all his children, she was the first to be swallowed, and the last to be freed. A full circle in flames. And maybe that's why she likes cycles. Stability, the gentle repetition of daily warmth. She's the one who lights the flame in every temple, every home, every city. Ancient Greeks believed that no matter how far you traveled, as long as Hestia's fire was burning, you could always find your way back. And here's the lovely part, when the gods were dividing up their powers and domains, ocean war, sky wine, Hestia stepped back. She gave up her seat on Olympus so Dionysus could have one. Not because she was weak, but because she didn't need a throne to have influence. Historians still debate whether this made her the wisest or the most forgotten. Maybe both. And unlike most Olympians, she was never dragged into scandal. No lovers, no feuds, no curses. She didn't chase mortals or turn them into animals. She just kept the fire going. A lesser-known version of her myth says that both Apollo and Poseidon once pursued her, two of the most powerful gods offering her romance, riches, divine status. And she turned them both down. She chose solitude, not from pain, not from fear, from peace. You watch her now as she ladles stew into a wooden bowl. She sets it beside the fire for anyone who might need it. A mortal, a nymph, a ghost. Doesn't matter. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't expect thanks. And here's a charming little fact: in some parts of Greece, when families moved houses, they carried coals from the old hearth to the new one. So Hestia could follow, so the spirit of home wouldn't be left behind. You sit down beside her. She doesn't speak, but she pushes a second bowl toward you. It smells like lentils and thyme, like something your grandmother might make if she had godlike patience. You eat, slowly. And in this moment, the loneliness that hung heavy over Hera, Demeter, Athena, and Artemis fades. Because this isn't a sad solitude. It's chosen, rooted, quietly, powerful. Hestia doesn't burn brightly. She burns always. When the world is loud, she listens. When others rage, she waits. When the myths end and the temples fall, she'll still be here, tending the flame, sweeping the floor, making sure that anyone who wanders in from the cold finds warmth, even if they never know her name. The fire is still warm when you leave Hestia, but the air outside feels different, lighter, as if your breath no longer fogs the night. You step into a place that has no walls, only columns and sky where the stars seem just slightly closer than usual. And, sitting quietly on the steps, hands folded in her lap, is Hestia again. But this time, she's not tending anything. She's waiting. You sit beside her, and for a while, neither of you speaks. That's fine. Hestia is the kind of presence that doesn't need to fill the silence. It fills itself. Slowly, though a story begins to press against the quiet one she doesn't often tell. The story of why she never married. You see, Hestia was wanted. Gods pursued her, not just romantically, but symbolically. Marriage to Hestia would have meant divine power, a hold over the concept of home itself. Think about that. If you marry the goddess of the hearth, every house becomes a shrine to you. Poseidon came first, charming, in his sea-drenched way, with promises of kingdoms and pearls, and maybe a trident or two. Then Apollo, radiant and golden, offered poetry and prophecy, and probably several overly long songs. And she said no, not rudely, not cruelly, just firmly. She took a vow of eternal virginity, not out of trauma like Artemis, or strict logic like Athena. No. Hestia simply preferred her own company. She didn't need to be claimed to feel divine, and in doing so, she became the only Olympian who never played chess with mortals' lives. Historians still argue whether this vow made her more powerful or quietly erased her from the drama-filled records. After all, it's hard to headline the ancient world's most chaotic family reunion if you're off baking flatbread in the background. But some say that's why she endured, because Hestia didn't spark wars or tempests. she sparked ovens, and mortals remembered. In every home there was a small altar to her, usually near the cooking fire, before meals, after prayers, at births, at deaths. Hestia's name was whispered at all the quiet hinges of life, the spaces in between. Here's a lovely forgotten little detail at city festivals. A portion of the first offering was always burned for Hestia, even before Zeus. Not because she demanded it, but because people wanted to. She was first and last out, the original welcome mat. And it's not that she had no emotion. In fact, in some myths, she's the one who mediates between feuding gods, who calms Hera when she's screaming, who sits beside Demeter when winter is too long, who listens to Athena without asking questions, who walks silently with Artemis after the dogs have gone. She's the friend who brings food, not opinions. She's the goddess who holds your coat while you cry. You turn to look at her now, and she meets your gaze not grandly, not divinely, just gently, like someone who sees you've been traveling too long and wants you to rest your feet. There are no temples left for her now, not really. No cult statues or burning altars. But if you light a candle in the kitchen at midnight and speak her name, she'll still come. Not to demand, just to warm your hands. And maybe that's the most sacred kind of power, to be chosen not out of fear or desire, but out of quiet need. Hestia stands now, brushes crumbs from her lap. She doesn't say goodbye. She doesn't need to. She was never far away to begin with. You leave Hestia's calm, quiet warmth and step into a place entirely different, more echo than space, more shadow than form. It's a canyon of sound where voices linger like perfume and bounce off the rocks long after their owners have disappeared. A place for those who once loved the sound of their own voices until that voice was taken away. This is where you find Echo. She's not a goddess, not even close, just a mountain nymph once known for talking far too much at the wrong time. And boy, did she talk. Echo didn't just speak, she rambled, she monologued, she narrated events that hadn't even happened yet. She was the original podcast host, really, except with more moss and fewer ad sponsors. According to the myth, her downfall wasn't her voice itself. It was why she used it. Zeus, yes, him again, was once sneaking off to visit some lovely mountain maidens, and Echo, loyal to her friends and maybe a little in love with drama, kept Hera distracted with endless chatter. For hours, days even, until Hera finally caught on. And let's just say, Hera wasn't in the mood for a TED Talk. As punishment, Hera didn't strike Echo with lightning or turn her into an animal. No, she did something worse. She left Echo with only the ability to repeat the last words someone else said. Not speak first, not express thought, just echo. Historians still argue whether this was a metaphor for women being denied their voices in society, or simply a story invented to explain why sound bounces in caves. Both might be true. That's the fun of myths. They can be petty, and profound at the same time. Now you follow Echo through the woods, her bare feet silent on the stone. She wants to speak to you. You can see it in her eyes. But all she can do is mirror back what you say. And what happens when no one speaks to you first? You vanish. Which brings us to Narcissus. Yes, that Narcissus. Echo saw him one day beautiful aloof, the kind of man who probably had multiple mirrors before mirrors were invented. She fell in love instantly. Not because he was kind, not because he listened, just because he looked like that. She followed him, whispered his name. Narcissus, she said. And he, annoyed, said, "Who's there?" To which she could only reply, "There. It's the world's worst, meet cute." Eventually, she stepped into the clearing, arms outstretched, silent tears already falling, and he predictably rejected her, not gently, not thoughtfully, just cruelly. She fled, heartbroken voice fading, until there was nothing left of her but the echo. Now here's the strange, sad twist. Narcissus got cursed too. Depending on the version, he fell in love with his own reflection because he scorned Echo, or because he scorned everyone. Either way, he ended up staring into a pond, entranced, unable to look away. He thought the reflection might love him back. It didn't. He died there, roots curling around his body, and in his place bloomed a flower, the narcissus. Meanwhile, Echo watched, powerless. She couldn't even say goodbye. You hear her now, barely audible, tucked into the corners of the cave. Goodbye. 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 Not because she wants to, but because someone once said it to her. Here's a fringe detail most people forget. In some later Roman adaptations, Echo regains some part of herself, not her full voice, but a trace of spirit. Enough to haunt canyons, maybe. Enough to laugh occasionally, if the wind's right. But she never speaks first. You sit in that cave for a while, listening to the way your own breath becomes someone else's memory. And you wonder, how many times have you spoken without really hearing? How many echoes have you left behind? You whisper one last word, rest, and wait. Softly it returns, rest. And for a moment she sounds almost at peace. You emerge from the cave, your ears still full of Echo's soft repetitions, and find yourself beside a glassy lake. It's so still it could be sky. You kneel beside it expecting fish or frogs, or maybe another nymph, but what you see instead is a figure curled beneath a tree, tracing her own reflection in the water with the tip of her finger. It's Echo again. But this time, she's not alone. Lying on the opposite side of the lake, face frozen in admiration, is Narcissus, or rather, what's left of him. His form is translucent, now more memory than man. His eyes are fixed on his own image eyes that have never truly seen anyone else. You watch as Echo mimics his gestures, his sighs, his silence, not out of mockery anymore, out of habit, out of love, maybe, or what's left of it, when love goes unanswered for too long. This is the part of the myth. Everyone remembers the boy who loved himself to death. But what's often forgotten is how Echo stayed, even when she had no voice, even when he never looked up. She stayed. Some say she hoped he'd notice her. Others say she just didn't know where else to go. Historians still debate whether the tale of Narcissus is a caution against vanity or a metaphor for emotional unavailability. Maybe both. Either way, it's not really his story we're telling anymore. It's hers. Echo, who could never start a conversation, who could only reflect back what others offered. What happens when the only person in your world refuses to speak at all? You become invisible. You become water. Here's a curious detail. Tucked into some later versions after Narcissus died, the gods, feeling unusually poetic, let his body dissolve into flowers and his voice into silence. But they left Echo untouched, not out of mercy, out of oversight. She simply faded. You walk around the lake now, watching the way her form flickers. One moment, a woman, the next, a breeze. She's not anchored to anything anymore. Not a home, not a body, not even grief. And yet she lingers. In canyons, sure, but also in dreams, in songs half remembered, in voices that don't quite belong to us. Echo became the static in our speech, the reminder that communication always begins with listening. You find a small stone and toss it into the lake. The ripples spread in concentric circles. For a moment, Narcissus's reflection breaks. Echo leans forward as if expecting change, but the ripples fade. He stays as he was. She whispers, "Stay." And he doesn't hear it. He never does. A fun tidbit. The name Echo in Greek echo comes from the verb to sound. But over time it became something you experience, not someone you hear. She went from noun to phenomenon, from person to background. And that perhaps is the cruelest transformation of all. You sit with her for a little while longer. You don't say anything. She doesn't either. But when you stand to leave, you whisper, "Thank you." And the breeze returns it softly. "Thank you." It's not quite her voice, but it's close enough. You leave the lake behind its surface, smooth once more, and follow a winding path through twilight. The air grows thicker, scented with myrrh and roses, the kind that bloom in places touched by divine hands. Marble columns rise around you, now not temples, but something more delicate, a garden, carefully tended, painfully perfect. And there, framed by golden vines and petals that never wilt, stands a mortal woman with the poise of a queen and the exhaustion of someone who's survived too much. This is Psyche. You may know her name, but her story. It's heavier than it looks. She was human. A girl so beautiful that people stopped worshiping Aphrodite just to stare at her. Now, in a world built on attention, nothing angers a goddess faster than losing her spotlight, especially Aphrodite. So she sent her son, Cupid, Eros, winged mischief maker, with a bow to punish Psyche. Make her fall in love with something horrible, she said. But fate or irony had other plans. Cupid pricked himself with his own arrow and fell for Psyche instead. Classic. But here's where things stop being cute. Cupid visits her only in darkness. She's not allowed to see his face. He comes each night, speaks softly, holds her gently, then vanishes by dawn. Psyche is in love, but she doesn't even know with whom. Historians still argue over what this symbolizes: blind faith, trust, the power imbalance in divine relationships. Eventually, her sisters convince her to light a lamp while he sleeps, to look. And when she does, she finds not a monster, but a literal god, radiant, vulnerable. A single drop of oil lands on his shoulder. He wakes. He leaves. And Psyche is alone. Here's where the story breaks you. A little she doesn't curl up and cry. She fights. She goes to Aphrodite herself, who smiles sweetly and hands her a list of impossible tasks. Sort this mountain of mixed seeds. Fetch golden wool from man-eating sheep. Gather water from a deadly river, each one designed to break her. And Psyche does them all. With ants, reeds, eagle feathers, nature helps her, not because she commands it, but because she endures. Because the world bends, just slightly, for those who refuse to give up. Her final task: retrieve a bit of beauty from the underworld for Aphrodite. But she's warned, don't open the box, and of course, she opens the box. Inside isn't beauty, it's sleep. Psyche collapses, cold, breathless, forgotten once again. But Cupid returns, moved not by pity, but by love. Real love. The messy, persistent, mortal kind. He revives her. He carries her to Olympus. And the gods, they don't throw thunderbolts. They give her ambrosia, make her immortal. Because what's more divine than a heart that survives everything? Here's a lesser-known detail. Psyche's name in Greek means soul, and Cupid, Eros, means desire. Their story isn't just about romance. It's about what happens when desire meets the soul, and how often it nearly destroys it. You walk with Psyche now through her garden of earned peace. She doesn't boast. She doesn't sparkle. She just breathes. She's not a goddess because of how she was born. She's a goddess because of what she endured. And her loneliness, it didn't come from isolation. It came from being tested again and again, and still choosing to keep her heart open. You sit beside her in the quiet. She offers you a fig from a silver bowl. You eat. And for a moment you believe that maybe, just maybe, suffering can be transformed. You stay in Psyche's garden for a while, until the perfume of roses becomes a little too sweet, the air a little too perfect. It's time to move on, because somewhere beyond the trellis of gold and grief, a storm is brewing. You step through a marble archway and the scent of flowers is replaced with salt. with jealousy, with the snap of silk in a sudden wind. This is where Aphrodite lives, and she's watching. You may think you know Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, sensuality, the foam-born Venus with seashells and doves. But behind all the pretty statues and Renaissance paintings is a storm with flawless eyebrows. Aphrodite doesn't just represent love. She represents being loved, being the most loved. And that comes with consequences. When mortals started calling Psyche the most beautiful woman alive, it wasn't just an insult to Aphrodite, it was treason. Historians still debate whether Aphrodite's vengeance was righteous or petty. Some argue she was defending divine hierarchy. Others think she was just bored and insecure. But either way, she took it personally. You walk through her temple now, every column carved like a curling wave, every mirror angled to reflect her face from 10 different perspectives. It's gorgeous. It's also exhausting. And you find her lounging on a couch made of mother of pearl, watching her own reflection in a goblet of wine. She doesn't look at you, not really. She looks through you. She remembers Psyche, and she remembers how it ended. That mortal girl who defied her tasks, stole her son, and was welcomed to Olympus. Aphrodite can't undo it, so she rebrands it. I taught her strength, she might say. She's only divine because of me. But the truth simmers. You sit beside her not too close and try to understand. What does it feel like to be worshipped for something as fragile as beauty? Something that can fade. Something that can be rivaled. Because here's the secret. Aphrodite's loneliness doesn't come from being unloved. It comes from being envied. From knowing every compliment hides a calculation. Every offering hides an expectation. And her own son Eros chose a mortal over her, fell in love, protected Psyche, forgave her, which means Aphrodite, goddess of irresistible attraction, was left alone. Here's a quirky little footnote from obscure mythology. In one tale, Aphrodite tries to win back Eros by visiting him in his sleep. She strokes his hair, leaves rose petals on his pillow, and whispers apologies he'll never fully hear. But even gods can't mend what's broken if they won't admit it was ever cracked. You walk with her through her halls now, past rows of dresses that shimmer with stardust, past fountains of milk and honey, past mirrors that sometimes show her old face and sometimes show nothing at all. You realize that beneath all the gold and perfume and praise, she's terrified. Terrified of being replaced. Terrified of fading. Terrified of what beauty becomes when no one's left to admire it. Even her affairs with Ares, with mortals, with anyone who wanted her, never lasted. Because they didn't love her. They loved the idea of her, the surface of her. And she knows it. She's the goddess of love, who's always watching others fall in love. Without her. You glance one last time at her reflection in the goblet. It ripples, slightly distorting her face. she sighs. It's the softest sound in the world, like silk tearing. You leave Aphrodite's palace behind its golden corridors, echoing with footsteps that are always her own. The scent of roses fades, replaced now with wind and stone and the strange hollow sound of voices that once mattered. You're following two women, now sisters. They walk ahead of you in matching gowns, matching jewels, matching smiles that flicker like candlelight in a gust of envy. These are Psyche's sisters, and this is their story, the one no one likes to talk about. They weren't evil, not at first, just ordinary. Royal, yes, but human in all the regular ways. Ambitious, insecure, hopeful. They had husbands, homes, wealth, but none of it felt like enough. Not after seeing Psyche. You see, when their little sister married someone rich and powerful, someone they never got to meet, they couldn't help it. The questions started to scratch at the edges of their minds. Who was this husband? Why wouldn't he show himself? Why couldn't they live in floating palaces too? And so they visited her. Once, then again and again, each time planting seeds of doubt like carefully chosen compliments. Are you sure he loves you? What if he's hiding something? What if he's a monster? Classic sister behavior with a sprinkle of mortal jealousy and a whole lot of accidental sabotage. Psyche believed them, lit the lamp, lost everything. And the sisters, they went home satisfied. They had proven their point, restored the natural order. Until the news came, Psyche was alive. And not just alive, immortal. Loved by a god. Embraced by Olympus. That's when something in them cracked. You walk with them now, along a cliff's edge. The wind is sharp, impatient. And the sisters are quiet for the first time in years. Because now they want what she has. In one version, they each throw themselves from a mountain, hoping the same invisible palace will catch them, hoping Eros will see them and mistake them for Psyche, hoping, hoping, hoping. But no palace appears, just the ground. Historians still argue over whether this ending was literal or moralistic. Did they really leap? Or was it just the poet's way of saying, envy will undo you? Either way, the myth ends the same. You stand now where they fell. There are no markers, no statues, no weeping gods. Just a sharp drop and a sky that doesn't care. Here's a strange little fragment from an ancient play that didn't survive fully. It hinted that the sisters weren't entirely forgotten, that in the underworld they're still together, still whispering, still wondering where it went wrong. You sit for a moment feeling the shape of that jealousy. It doesn't burn. It hollows. The kind of emptiness that isn't noisy or violent. It's quiet. It lingers in the corners of compliments. It clings to laughter that doesn't quite reach the eyes. They didn't hate Psyche. They just couldn't stand being left behind. You glance up now, half expecting them to appear again, hands clasped, eyes wide. But the wind only carries silence. The myth doesn't mourn them. And maybe that's the point. Some women in Olympus were forgotten, not because they were evil, but because their stories didn't fit the mold. Because they weren't divine enough, or tragic enough, or beautiful enough to become stars. They just lived. And then they didn't. You leave the cliffs behind there, silence still clinging to your skin, and follow a path that twists underground. The light shifts, softer, cooler, tinted with the faintest hue of pomegranate red. You're moving towards someone you've already met in pieces, in the flowers that wilted in the snow that fell in the mother who mourned. This time you're walking beside Persephone herself, but not the maiden, not the lost daughter, not the story whispered in spring. No, this is Persephone the queen. You find her seated on a throne carved from obsidian, and bone her hands resting lightly on her lap. She's not smiling, but she's not sad either. She's composed, the kind of composure that only comes from spending half your life underground and deciding to make it yours. You expect her to look like a hostage. She doesn't. In fact, she looks like someone who's stopped apologizing for surviving. Her marriage to Hades is one of the most complicated stories in mythology. Was it a kidnapping? A political arrangement? A cosmic mistake? Historians still argue whether she went willingly or learned to stay, whether she was tricked by the pomegranate seeds or chose to eat them. But here's what's certain. Persephone isn't just the goddess of spring. She's the ruler of the dead, and no one tells that story. You walk through her halls now, glistening with mineral veins and quiet footsteps. Shades drift past you. They don't cry. They don't scream. They just exist. And Persephone moves among them with quiet authority. She doesn't command attention. She receives it, like gravity. Here's a quirky detail, often overlooked. The dead can't lie in her presence. Her gaze sees through memory, through ego, through narrative. It's said that when she looks at you, even your bones remember who you were supposed to be. And yet, for all her power, there's still a crack in the ceiling sunlight, trying to reach her. She spends 6 months of the year above with Demeter. Green things bloom, birds return, dresses swirl. But the rest of the year, here, not in prison, not in exile, in rain. Persephone is the only goddess who belongs fully to 2 worlds, and it has cost her everything. She misses her mother when she's below. She misses her throne when she's above. No home is whole anymore. You sit beside her on the cool stone, and she offers you a fig soaked in honey. It tastes like memory, like things you can't get back. She tells you without speaking that every spring feels a little less like freedom, and every winter a little less like punishment. Because when you've lived through both enough times, you stop dividing them. You just live. There's an old myth that says Persephone once refused a soul passage, not because they were wicked, but because they reminded her of herself before, and she couldn't bear it. Another says she grants second chances to those who weep honestly at her feet. And you believe it. You believe everything here, even the silence, especially the silence. You look at her now, flower crown, wilting slightly, fingers tapping a rhythm. Only she understands and realizes she's not trapped. She's complicated, and no one ever built temples for complicated women, just stories. You climb slowly out of the underworld, now trailing Persephone's shadow as it stretches behind you like a ribbon that's been pulled too tight for too long. The air shifts again, warmer, thinner, full of birdsong and possibility. Spring is blooming. But it doesn't feel like a beginning, not really, because now you see the pattern. Each goddess, each woman carved her life out of something incomplete. Marriage that hurt, power that isolated, praise that felt hollow, the spotlight, the silence, the crown, and none of them ever got to choose all of it. Now you're walking alone along a marble hallway of Olympus, abandoned almost museum-like. The frescoes flicker in the torchlight. They show Hera with thunder in her eyes. Demeter bent over bare fields. Athena with her mouth set into a line sharp enough to cut Artemis, walking alone, bow loose in hand. Hestia is not even pictured, and echoes, well, you know how that ends. But here's the thing that tugs at you now, like the hem of a memory. These women were never meant to be lonely. Not really. They were worshipped, feared, painted in colors that humans could not mix without the divine. But worship is not warmth, and Olympus, for all its golden halls and eternal feasts, was not a home. You find yourself in the garden again, the one that belongs to no single goddess. It's overgrown, wild. Flowers bloom out of cracks in the stone. Ivy claims abandoned altars. It's quiet here, but not dead. This is where the stories settled, when no one was listening anymore. And here's a curious little tidbit in late antiquity, as new gods rose and the Olympians faded. Hestia's flame was the last to be extinguished, not out of disrespect, but because no one could bear to snuff out something so gentle. She stayed until the very end. You sit on a broken column now, watching the sun dip below a horizon that feels older than language. And you wonder, did they ever meet here? The goddesses? Did they ever just talk Hera and Demeter, passing tea across a table made of regrets? Athena listening, finally, instead of analyzing. Artemis leaning back, her wolves napping at her feet. Hestia smiling faintly. Echo repeating a line that made them laugh. Psyche arriving, late petals in her hair, and Persephone nodding from the doorway like she knows what it's like to leave and come back different. You'll never know for sure, but you like to think they did, that they do, because even eternal loneliness can't last forever, not with women like this. Night has fallen now, slow and steady, like a thick blanket drawn across the sky. The stars blink awake, one by one, ancient and unhurried, as if they know you've reached the end of the path. You're still in the garden, the wild one, overrun with myths that were once polished, now soft at the edges, like sea glass. And you're not alone. The goddesses are here, not as statues, not as thunderclaps, but as presence, as stories that breathe. You move quietly past a broken pedestal. There's Hera, her crown set beside her, like a memory too heavy to wear. She's not watching for Zeus anymore. She's watching the stars. Her fingers trace the air in silence, not spells, not threats, just thoughts no one ever asked her to share. A few steps further, and you see Demeter kneeling in the soil. She plants nothing. She simply presses her palm flat into the earth, as if listening for footsteps that won't come until spring. And when she closes her eyes, the grass leans toward her. Athena sits at the base of a tree. Her armor is gone. She holds a book, not reading it, just holding it. For the first time in centuries, her shoulders are not squared for war. They are curved like a woman who's tired of winning alone. Artemis is on the edge of the clearing, her hounds asleep at her feet. Her bow leans against a tree, forgotten for now. She's looking up at the moon, not claiming it, not commanding it, just looking. And for once, it seems to look back. Hestia tends a small flame nearby. It doesn't blaze. It glows. No one asks her what she's thinking, and she doesn't need to answer. She hums softly a song you don't know, but feels like home anyway. And Persephone, she stands just beyond them, all half in shadow, half in starlight. The queen and the daughter, the lost and the ruler. She lifts a pomegranate half to her lips, smiles, and doesn't eat it. Not yet. They're not talking, not aloud, but there is a knowing here, a mutual understanding of what it means to be divine and forgotten, powerful and underestimated, seen and unseen. You sit on the grass now, knees pulled, in watching them like fireflies, too bright to catch. Here's a quiet fact, just for you. Even in the old days, worship wasn't always about temples. Sometimes it was a whispered name at dusk, a story told by candlelight, a statue hidden in a garden where no one would find it but the wind. You are part of that now, a living listener, a keeper of names. And maybe, just maybe, that's all they ever wanted, to be remembered, to be heard without echoing, to be seen not for what they represent, but for who they became after the stories stopped being told. You look at them one last time before you go. They don't wave, but they know you were here, and that's enough. The garden grows dim now. The goddesses remain where they are, like constellations that never needed the sky. One by one, the torches extinguish, not with wind, but with calm. No final declarations, no epic farewells, just the gentle settling of breath into sleep. You stretch out beneath the olive branches. The ground is soft and smells faintly of time and old books and the kind of dust that only gathers in sacred places. Above you, the stars do not twinkle. They breathe, and in that breath, you hear nothing tragic, nothing angry, only stillness, the kind that lives beneath noise, the kind that tucks you in. The stories you've swallowed tonight will linger, not in your ears, but in the quiet moments when you pass a mirror or stir a pot or walk alone through a hallway and wonder what it means to be seen. You've walked with goddesses who were left behind by the thunder and the glory, but not by time. And in doing so, you've kept them company. Their names will echo in your mind now, not as warnings, but as lullabies. Hera, Demeter, Athena, Artemis, Hestia, Persephone, Echo, Psyche, even Aphrodite in her loneliness. You remember them now, and they remember you. Close your eyes. Let the myths grow quiet. Let the stars turn. Let sleep take you, gentle as moonlight on marble. Good night.